Plato didn't romanticize love. He dissected it. He warned, what you chase in her is the illusion you refuse to face in yourself. She wasn't your truth. She was your temptation, and you failed the test. Plato said Eros wasn't love. It was longing, a hunger for wholeness, the ache you feel when something deep inside you knows you're incomplete, but you didn't understand that. No one does. Until it's too late. You thought you loved her. You thought the way your chest tightened, the way your heart raced, the way her voice echoed in your head meant something real. But it wasn't love. It was fantasy. You weren't drawn to her. You were drawn to what she reflected, a feeling, a version of you that you hadn't seen in years, maybe ever. Plato warned, the lover doesn't see the beloved clearly. He sees what he's missing. He sees what he's starving for, and he mistakes that projection for the woman herself. That's what you did. You didn't fall in love. You fell into projection. You gave her qualities she didn't possess, depth she hadn't earned, meaning she never claimed. She became the goddess in your story, not because she was divine, but because your emptiness needed something sacred to chase. And once your mind made her sacred, your power was gone. That's what most men never realize. The woman didn't destroy you. Your illusion of her did. You weren't chasing her body. You were chasing the completion of your inner fracture, that feeling of being whole, seen, chosen, wanted. But no woman can give you that. And every attempt to extract it will cost you your masculinity, because now you're not leading. You're not evaluating. You're not in your center. You're orbiting a fantasy. You call it connection, but it's dependency. You call it love, but it's an emotional hostage situation where you're both the prisoner and the jailer. Plato saw this clearly. He said the soul that doesn't understand itself will always seek its missing half in another, and in doing so, it loses its identity. That's what happened to you. She didn't manipulate you. You manipulated yourself with your own illusion of her, and when she left, when she stopped reflecting the version of you that felt alive and seen, you collapsed, not because she was your soulmate, but because your mirror shattered. And when the mirror goes, so does the false self you built around it. So now you're here, empty, confused, angry, not because she betrayed you, but because you betrayed your own clarity. Plato wasn't warning you about her. He was warning you about you, your tendency to fall in love with a dream, your hunger to find yourself through someone else's eyes. And until you confront that, you'll keep calling projection chemistry and illusion destiny. She seemed magnetic. You couldn't explain it. Something about the way she moved, the way she spoke, it felt like gravity. You called it chemistry. You called it divine. You told yourself, she's different, but she wasn't different. You were empty, and that emptiness needed a story to survive. Plato warned us centuries ago. The soul doesn't see truth. It projects. It takes what it lacks and assigns it to someone else to make the pain bearable, to make the hollowness feel meaningful. You looked at her and didn't see a woman. You saw potential, symbolism, a myth wrapped in skin. You thought she had depth, but it wasn't her depth you were experiencing. It was your own suppressed longing echoing off the surface of someone who hadn't even earned your vulnerability. That's why it felt spiritual, not because she had power, but because your mind was starving for meaning, and meaning makes anything glow, even a stranger. You gave her magic. You gave her mystery. You gave her emotional power she didn't cultivate, didn't ask for, didn't even understand. You weren't attracted to her mind. You were drowning in your own projection, and the moment she pulled away, the illusion cracked. Not because she changed, but because reality interrupted your fantasy. You weren't mourning her. You were mourning the escape she gave you, because when you were with her, you didn't have to face your own stillness, your own silence, your lack of direction, your buried need to be completed by someone else, so you never had to do the work of completing yourself. She didn't possess magic. She revealed your absence of it, and that's the part that burns, because now you look back and realize she never really said anything profound. She never did anything rare. She just stood there, and your hunger did the rest. You built her up because you needed to be pulled up. You crowned her, hoping she'd carry you to your own throne. But no one can do that, and every time you assign depth to someone who hasn't earned it, you give away the one thing you were born to protect, your center. Plato's warning wasn't about women. It was about fantasy, about the danger of mistaking projection for truth, and calling it love. He knew what happens when men lose touch with their own meaning. They start worshiping anyone who reflects a piece of it. You thought she made you feel alive, but what really happened? You handed her your soul because you were too afraid to build it alone. Plato didn't glorify physical beauty. He dissected it. He said beauty wasn't the truth. It was a reflection of it, a glimmer of something higher, something eternal, but not the source itself. And yet, you treated her body like scripture. You saw her curves and forgot your values. You saw her face and abandoned your path. You saw the reflection and bowed to it. That's where most men fall. You thought her glow meant salvation, that her softness meant safety, that her eyes held wisdom, just because they pulled you in. But beauty doesn't guide. It seduces. It distracts. It awakens the parts of you that crave meaning, then tricks you into thinking she is the meaning. She isn't. She's the mirror. You were supposed to notice the reflection and turn inward, but you chased the surface like it was your map to heaven, and it led you straight into collapse because you didn't fall in love with her. You fell into the image of what she represented. That's the trap Plato tried to expose. He warned, if you stop at the physical, you'll never reach the truth. But you didn't want the truth. You wanted comfort, a shortcut, a divine experience without doing divine work. So you mistook the glow for the flame and burned for nothing. She didn't destroy you. You did, by making her your guide when she was only ever meant to be a symbol. She didn't owe you wisdom. She didn't owe you love. She was simply standing there, reflecting your hunger. But because you were ungrounded, because your shadow was loud and your center was silent, you gave her power she didn't earn. You followed the glow, and the glow led you to illusion. Now here you are, ashes, angry, asking why she betrayed you, but she didn't. The betrayal happened the moment you decided the external would save you, the moment you believed desire was truth, the moment you followed beauty instead of building strength. Plato's words weren't poetic. They were surgical. He wasn't warning you about lust. He was warning you about your response to it, because when a man sees beauty but doesn't chase it, he becomes powerful. He holds the mirror. He sees the truth behind the form, and that truth gives him clarity. But the man who worships the mirror, he lives in distortion. He follows shadows. He gives his soul to reflections, and he dies chasing something that was never real. She didn't lie to you. You built the lie for her to walk into. That's what most men don't realize. You think she manipulated you, played you, used you. But what she really did was show up and allow you to project every unmet need, every fantasy, every childhood wound onto her face. You handed her the crown before she earned it, called her your peace, your purpose, your healing. Not because she was those things, but because your soul needed something to worship, and she was simply standing there. Most men don't want to lead. They want to worship, because worship is easier than self-direction. It feels safer to believe in a savior than to become your own. Plato knew this. He saw how men turn women into gods because they're afraid to face their own chaos. So instead of mastering it, they hand it over, wrapped in obsession, dressed as love. And some women, especially those in their shadow, they know this, even if not consciously. They feel your need to idealize. They feel your hunger to be completed, and they play into it, not by lying, but by letting you lie to yourself, just enough to keep you attached. She says just enough to sound deep. She disappears just enough to create mystery. She lets your fantasy do the rest. And the more you imagine her as divine, the less power you have, because now you're not in a relationship. You're in a performance. You're playing the role of the loyal servant, waiting for her to fulfill the script you wrote in your head. And when she breaks character, when she shows her humanness, you collapse. You feel betrayed. But what you're really mourning is the death of your illusion. That's how control works. Not through threats, not through dominance, but through fantasy. The fantasy she didn't have to create. because you brought it with you. She just stood inside it and watched you fall. This is the feminine shadow, not the nurturer, not the muse, but the mirror that reflects your weakness, then feeds on it. She doesn't demand your power. She waits for you to offer it, and you always do, because it feels romantic to collapse for love, to sacrifice for beauty, to burn for someone who never asked you to. You called it depth, but it was dependency. You called it loyalty, but it was desperation. Plato wasn't warning you about her lies. He was warning you about your own. Because once a man idealizes what he doesn't understand, he becomes easy to control and impossible to respect. Plato didn't teach men to chase love. He taught them to master themselves, because true power never comes from being desired, it comes from being directed internally. But you forgot that. You stopped building yourself the moment she looked your way, and from that point forward, everything you did was to be seen, validated, chosen. You chased her like she was a prize, but she wasn't. She was a reflection of how far you drifted from your own center. You gave her power not because she earned it, but because you abandoned it. The moment your attention became performance, the moment your value depended on her reaction, you were no longer a man. You were a puppet, pulling your own strings to keep her interested. That's how a man becomes weak in love. Not because love is weakness, but because he starts trading his identity for connection. Every compliment you forced, every boundary you ignored, every moment you softened your truth just to keep her close. You lost a piece of yourself. And what did she do? She ruled you, not with orders, not with demands, but with your own need to be seen. That's what made you controllable. She didn't have to manipulate you. You were already bending because you thought her gaze would make you real. You thought being wanted by her would heal something your father never gave you. You thought being chosen meant you were finally enough. But a man who needs to be chosen has already forgotten his worth. Plato warned, external beauty tempts the soul to forget its own direction. And that's exactly what happened. You gave her the script, the spotlight, the throne, not because she asked for it, but because something inside you needed someone else to define your significance. And now, you're bitter, resentful, ashamed, not because she hurt you, but because you saw the truth. You traded your power for proximity. You handed her the crown because you forgot you were already wearing one. She didn't break you. She exposed where you'd stopped leading, and until you face that, you'll keep losing yourself in the illusion that love is something to be earned, instead of something to be shared when you're already whole. So here's the shift. You don't need her gaze. You need your own back, because a man who sees himself clearly doesn't need to be seen by anyone else. And the moment you return to that, the moment your validation stops leaking outward, she no longer rules you, you rule yourself. Plato never told you to chase love. He told you to chase truth. And truth doesn't lie in beauty. It doesn't live in her eyes. It doesn't speak through her silence. It lives inside you, but only if you're willing to face what's been buried. The real warning wasn't about women. It was about distraction. Because once you start looking outward for what should be developed inward, you've already left the path. That's what she became. Not a soulmate, a test, a mirror of your projections, an embodiment of everything you hadn't yet faced, the love you never received, the power you never claimed, the shadow you kept calling passion. She triggered it, and you called it fate. But it wasn't fate. It was unintegrated emotion looking for a stage, and she gave it to you. She didn't manipulate you with logic. She didn't have to. She used your own mind, your own fantasy, your own idealism against you. You made her a goddess so you wouldn't have to become a man, because becoming a man requires facing pain, silence, loneliness, all the things she helped you escape. But Plato warned, until the soul ascends beyond illusion, it remains chained to shadows, believing they're real. That's where you've lived, in shadows, in need, in the desperate hope that if she just came back, looked your way, gave you that same hit of attention, you'd feel alive again. But here's the truth. If you need her to feel whole, you've already failed the path. You've already surrendered the very thing the path is trying to give you, sovereignty. The woman is not your problem. Your response to her is the story you built around her, the parts of yourself you handed away just to be close. This is where the real work begins, not in her apology, not in closure, not in waiting for her to realize what she lost. It begins in you, and it's brutal, because shadow work means sitting with the truth. You used her, just like she may have used you. You used her to escape yourself, to avoid the silence, to fill the gap you were too afraid to face. But you can face it now, not through more information, not through another breakup video, but through discipline, silence. Make space every day where no one else's voice can reach you, because your clarity won't scream, it whispers, and you'll miss it if you're too busy scrolling, begging, reacting, journaling. Not affirmations, not "I am love," but the brutal truth. What am I afraid to say out loud? What part of me still needs her attention to feel valuable? Where am I performing just to stay desirable? Write it. Burn it if you need to, but stop hiding from it. Sexual energy transmutation. Take that lust, that hunger, that collapse, and alchemize it into intensity, into presence, into creative fire, because that energy doesn't need to be repressed, it needs to be redirected. The work isn't pretty, but it's powerful, and the further you go, the less you need her, not because you stopped caring, but because you remembered who you are without her reflection. That's what Plato was trying to show you. The real love story isn't you plus her. It's you plus your soul's return to center. She was the lesson, not the light. She was the detour, not the destination. You don't heal by fixing her. You heal by facing you. And when you do, you don't chase love. You radiate gravity. Plato never told you to reject desire. He told you to rise above it. He called it the ladder of love. You begin with physical attraction, yes, but if you stay there, you remain a slave to it. The goal isn't denial. It's transcendence. To see the beauty and not boo. To feel the pull and not follow. To hold the fire without being burned by it. That's what most men never learn, because they think power means shutting it off, avoiding her, running from the lust. But the lust isn't the enemy, it's the leash, and the leash only works when you believe it leads somewhere divine. She was never divine. She was form, a body, a look, an energy, and you gave that form meaning it never asked for. You made her the flame, the source, the altar, and that's why you got burned. Because when you worship the form, you become controlled by the reaction it creates in you. She didn't need to dominate you. Your desire did. Your fixation. Your emotional fantasy wrapped in a beautiful shape. But once you see through the form, once you master the desire, not repress it, but transform it, that's when you become untouchable. You stop chasing the high. You stop mistaking the chemical hit for a cosmic sign. You stop letting a face dictate your fate. Because now, you don't just want her, you see her as she is. And in that clarity, her power fades. She's no longer the flame. You are. You become the fire she studies, the heat she can't hold, the stillness that doesn't flinch when she tests, tempts, retreats. You lead your energy. You direct your hunger. You stay grounded in the storm. That's not suppression. That's command. Plato called this higher love, not lower, animalistic obsession, but divine awareness, not need, not chaos, not collapse, but a love that doesn't pull you out of yourself. It deepens your selfhood. It aligns with your purpose. It serves your soul's expansion, not your ego's addiction. This is the final shift. You're not a beggar. You're not a boy starving for her gaze. You're not the man who falls apart when beauty enters the room. You're the one who holds frame, who holds fire, who doesn't chase the illusion because you've already found the source within yourself. She may still be beautiful, still magnetic, still everything she always was, but she's no longer the test. She's the reflection of how far you've come. Let's make this clear. She was never what you thought she was. She didn't save you. She didn't destroy you. She reflected you. She was the mirror for your hunger, for your idealism, for every forgotten part of you begging to be seen, so you cast it on her. And when she smiled, you felt whole. When she left, you felt broken, but the hole was never hers to give, and the break was never hers to cause. It was you and the illusion you built in her image. You weren't betrayed by her. You were betrayed by the fantasy you wrapped around her, the story you wrote, the crown you placed on her head, the parts of yourself you gave away and called love. And now you're here, stripped down, angry, confused, not because she changed, but because the mirror cracked. And when the mirror breaks, you're forced to face what you never wanted to see, the truth. She didn't possess what you were searching for. You did. You just didn't believe it was real, unless it was reflected back at you. So you poured yourself into her, hoped she would return you to yourself, but she never could. She was never designed to, because the feminine form was never the destination. It was the temptation, the test Plato warned you about. He never hated women. He respected the power they held over the unawakened man. He said, if you don't rise above illusion, if you don't transcend the obsession with form, you'll drown in it and call it fate. That's what happened. You weren't in love. You were in escape. You didn't desire her presence. You feared your own absence. You weren't craving her. You were starving for yourself. But the mirror shattered, and now you have a choice. Keep chasing reflections, hoping one finally completes you, or start rebuilding the man who doesn't need to be reflected to feel real. That's where this ends, and where the real journey begins, not with another woman, not with revenge, not with false healing, but with reclamation. You stop asking why she didn't choose you, and you start asking, why did I abandon myself in the process of being chosen? You stop dissecting her behavior and start confronting your own collapse, your approval seeking, your emotional leakage, your unconscious addiction to being needed so you wouldn't have to need yourself. This isn't about her anymore. It never was. She was the mirror. You are the meaning. She was the trigger. You are the truth. She revealed the fracture. You rebuild the foundation. And once you do, you stop orbiting beauty. You stop leaking energy into fantasies. You stop begging mirrors to make you feel whole, because you've remembered what she was meant to remind you of, that everything you chased in her was always inside you. Final line. You were never weak. You were just unconscious. And now, you see? And once you see, you never go back.